let's go back to open discussion, everyone. And so you guys can unmute yourselves and discuss, any of the topics that we've talked about today or wherever things lead, and then just try and be respectful of each other's, speaking, I suppose.
My question, I have one question. Mark Sokol, can you give us an update, of the latest thing that you have done? I mean, on your Alzofon experiment, what is coming next? What results are you getting? I know that every now and then you come up in YouTube, some news come out, so will you tell us what is the preview of upcoming attractions?
If Mark is on, I'm not sure if he's still on.
I called Mark a few minutes ago and he said he was home, not at the lab any longer.
Okay.
That settles that.
He's always working on several things at the same time. I've struggled with just one device for years.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want, if you want real quick, I can walk you through my latest disasters.
I would like to hear it.
Okay, yeah, here, let me do that. Let me share my screen real quick. So again, I'm not doing propulsion stuff. And the reason is when I have propulsion stuff, I usually push that back to the APEC conference, right? But I have my little, Tim Ventura interviews. You can check it out. Just, I don't know, here, I'll put it in chat, but let me see. And this is just basically my interview channel. I have a few APEC presentations on this channel, stuff that kind of fits my format. I put it up and try and get it some more exposure. But for the most part, lately, it's just been interviews, right? Usually half an hour to an hour long. So I did a really enormous one with Jack Sarfati. I also have, if you look at my playlists, I have one on superluminal communications. And there are 5, and I have one more that I'm going to add to this as well. So I've got a lot on that. I would say one of the biggest, most interesting things that I found was Gary Stevenson did a presentation that this was at APEC on superluminal communications. And when I put that up on LinkedIn, people got upset and they said, well, no, they said that violates the no communications theorem. And so I asked Gary about it. He said, well, no, he's like, that's kind of an outdated modality or mentality. So that's why I dug into the superluminal communications. I ended up doing a series of 5 interviews on that. And the long and the short of it is that you should be able to use quantum entanglement to communicate instantly. Just it's a little harder than mainstream physics believes. So I've got that. Then space-based beam power. I did that last week. I've been doing a fair amount on the Fermi paradox. I've been trying to do UAPs and dig into the UAP thing and explore what they could be and various aspects of that. And then I also was able to interview Gary McKinnon this week. So that's kind of the recent stuff that I've been into. I've been adding again a fair amount there. I like to put stuff in that's not, again, it's not all, it's across the spectrum, right? So this one, David Carrier, Human Adaptations for Aggression. For me, that was really interesting when I read about it. He's actually a really wonderful person. I'm gonna do an interview with him again. That has nothing to do with APEC, but it's interesting. Basically, what he was saying is that when men develop, the testosterone in your body as a teenager makes your hands form better fists. And the reason is the human fist is how we naturally fight. This is our natural fighting as human beings. So not only does the testosterone do that, but the testosterone thickens the bones in your face that get punched. And so what he was saying was, and they've done a lot of study on this, that human men have been fighting with each other for so long that we've evolved towards it. And not surprisingly, one of the major things that we fight about is women. So So, you know, he said that and I was like, well, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? So, yeah. So apparently men have been fighting over girls for as long as we've been human beings. And the reason that we did that interview was I really wanted to dig in and explore, you know, like this thing with Ukraine, right? I mean, it's like we're just always fighting, always fighting. And I was like, okay, you know, I mean, think about it. World War One, the war to end all wars, and it didn't, you know, and just war after war after war. And I was like, what if the problem is us, you know? And I think ultimately I think it is. You know, on a one-on-one level, most of us are fine, but we have those urges and those tendencies, and those come out, you know. So.
Well, I think, you know, with the Nobel Prize for quantum entanglement given, you know, this year, you should be able to get more of this communication quantum entanglement.
Yeah, I have one
subject.
more. I have one more to do. Shan Gao, he's Chinese, and that's next Friday. So I did do 2 interviews on quantum entanglement. I did, and those are in there. So Jack Sarfati, I really drilled down on it with him. That was, once he gets going, that was 2.5 hours. And yeah, if you watch that, you can see like the last hour of that. I'm just basically I look punch drunk. I was just like, yeah.
Well, I know he's an encyclopedia of knowledge. I mean, because in the interview that he gave, one I saw in APEC, oh man, there was a lot of material there, a lot of stuff that it takes a long time to digest, but it's good to know.
And the other person is Tim Maudlin, and I really like him. And Tim Maudlin is the president or the founder of the John Bell Foundation. I forgot to give him credit. I didn't know that when I started.
Oh yeah, the Bell inequality.
Yeah, exactly. And he's the president of the John Bell Foundation. So yeah, and Maudlin, again, wonderful person. All of these gentlemen are far smarter than I am, you know, but they don't beat me up too bad. So
hey Tim,
yeah, go for it, man.
One interesting synchronicity or coincidence about your Gary McKinnon interview, it was like that day or the next day, John Greenwald Jr. over at Black Vault got like his largest ever dump from NASA of like 750 pages or megabytes or something. And in there was some good stuff, some new UFO videos that hadn't been out that some guy keeps emailing the NASA head guy, hey, would you look at these? That kind of stuff.
Interesting. I don't know what to make of the UFO thing. The problem is the direction that it seems to be leading is something that I struggle with, I guess, you know.
What direction is leading to, do you think?
Well, I mean, it seems like it's gradually opening up more and more. I mean, what Gary McKinnon described was he was describing these UAP things, sort of. What he described sounded like Fravor's UAP. What's interesting is when he first described that in the news, it was years before the Nimitz thing was public. So, you know, it's difficult to know, but I don't know. I mean, the problem with UFOs is you have UFOs as an event that we can't explain, and then probably some kind of extraterrestrial craft, that's not an easy pill to swallow by itself. And then you've got people who talk about aliens, and that's even more challenging, right? Because you know, we don't have any real evidence for them. So
on 2 parts of that. One, I want to say that it was either DeLong or Corbell, one of the main faces out there, the whole thing. They just posted on Twitter recently that a bunch of whistleblowers are supposed to be coming forward in December or by December. So hopefully, even by the end of the year, we might know at least a little bit more. The second thing is
I heard about that.
The second thing is,
hey Tim. Hey Tim, this is Ted. I got to sign. Excuse me, I got to sign off. Thank you. It was excellent Zoom. Look forward to the next one.
And thank you as well, Ted. Thank you so much.
Okay, good night.
Have a wonderful evening, sir.
The other thing was that Ted Phillips, the main trace case researcher for MUFON, and he worked with Blue Book. He's the world's expert on UFO
You
traces.
certainly know how to get my attention.
He ended up finding, he just passed away a couple years ago. The APEC presentation I'm working on has a lot of his work in there, but the gist is that it was something around 19 to 23% of landings ended up having occupants of some kind. It was a really high number. It's not like 1 out of 1,000. It was like 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 4, which is really, really high when you think about just how crazy that is. And the types of occupants described are not all little grays. They're all over the board. There's all sorts of types out there, and it went over the greater part of the 20th century. He describes all sorts of different non-human occupants, from over 3,000 or 5,000 landing cases that he went out and personally researched. So it was no less than like 1,000 occupants accounts.
Now, what would be interesting is if that changed when it hit the media. See, one of the I mean, there are a couple of big problems, right? That I don't think we've been able to figure out. One of them is psychologically, we have this stereotype now of what aliens are supposed to look like and do and be, and it's modern mythology, and so part of it's that, but then the other part is it's like, I mean, we've always had angels and demons and fairies and things like that, right? Those stories explain the unexplainable to us. And UFO aliens are the equivalent of that for a more advanced world. And so, I don't know, again, that's why the psychology aspect of this is so important, and it's just been so neglected. It's hard to know, it's like, what's real and what's the imagination?
Well, and then you throw in telepathy or any other, non-materialism type explanation stuff, and the woo just gets so deep so quick. But from the traces, when you see little footprints, that match the size of the occupants, you see that in hundreds of cases. That's the kind of stuff that, for me at least, it takes it from mythology to, no, this is an expert researcher who went out and measured with all sorts of instruments and consistently found that people were telling the truth when they said, this is what just landed in their backyard.
I know for me personally, it's like one step at a time. You know what I mean? It's too much. It's a big leap of, the thing is, it's not just one, it's like 10 leaps of faith, and they're all built on each other. And then it's like, okay, so I'm kind of like, okay, again, from everyone that I know, I have a lot of contacts in the military and all that. Every single person that I've met or interviewed so far has basically said something is going on. And I don't think, I don't know anybody who claims to know what that I take seriously right now. So. Yeah, well, again, this is our open discussion. I don't know how many folks we have with us here at this point. Most of these are kind of muted out.
Yeah.
Let me see. I see Dexor. Dexor, how are you doing, sir?
Good. Hey.
Quiet. He's being quiet. And then there's Rick. Rick, thank you, sir. Rick has been here. Rick's been pinging me. Yeah, I think we're winding things down. So again, guys, we're looking at changing the format. We're probably going to focus a lot more on experimental stuff. And part of that is because in the past, what I've always tried to do is go out and find guests, right? Someone who could speak effectively. And, and actually Phil had given a couple of ad hoc presentations. And so he was the only person, him and Jeremy Reese were the only people who were ready, who wanted to present. I have a few more people, but they were saying, okay, later next year. And, and so the feeling that I get, the very real feeling, is that we've exhausted the folks who want to present. And in a weird way, I think that's a giant success story. I mean, we've been doing this conference for 2 years. Next month is our 2-year anniversary, and I mean, the big one, the fish that got away, was James Woodward, right? And he presented last month, and it was kind of like, okay, what do I do now? So, so I will probably change formats and go to something where it's more about continuing work. We could still have Q&A and discussion and all that stuff, but that way we don't feel pressured to try and fill guest spots, which has kind of been, progressively more challenging for the last few months.
Well, but the propulsion community is a small community,
Yeah.
the alternate, unless you got into jet engine, propeller, and they have their big conference and everything, because that's what is in industry. But here is a conference that trying to present a new idea, trying to change the world, everything. And that there are not too many in that category.
It's
that makes it hard.
It's a small community, and and I think what it is our conference is outpacing what people are able to produce.
Yeah, the creativity. There's a lot of new creativity coming in, because all that is good information that may pay off, sometime in the future. And there's the present, the same time, there's the academia, that everybody concentrated on what is in the past, like rocket propulsion, the whole engine, all the things, established science. And this conference is doing, the next generation, the next big thing. And sometimes the next big thing, may, from birth to conception to become a commercial product, it's maybe years, but and that's what makes it, make it difficult. I mean, that's my viewpoint. That's what makes it difficult for this type of conference. The propulsion community is more, and also you have to show result, because anybody can come up with an idea, a theory, beautiful, it works on paper, but when you build it, hey, it doesn't work. I know I went that route many times.
No, I totally get what you're saying. And
okay, on your expertise, on the lifter, tell me about what happened to one time lifter technology was the big thing, everybody.
Well, we plateaued with the lifters.
What happened?
What happened was we hit a plateau. It was the power to weight ratio, right? That's the plateau. And someone has said, and I guess you could, in some ways, in some ways the lifters had some advantages in terms of power to weight, but you had to stack the coils apart, or else the electric field smoothed out, and you had all these issues with corona wires and things like that. And so, after a while, it just reaches a point where it's like, this is not highly practical,
But the other part is that sometimes I think the creativity stopped flowing at some point. That it looked like everything that I've seen is a repetition, and a small change or something, but there have been no breakthrough innovation, because the other thing that I see, the limitation on the lifter technology, is a propellant driven, because you're using the ionized air, even though there are some theories and no, it's not, it doesn't depend on the air. There is something more in there, and I didn't see much exploration on that component that does not depend on releasing ions and speeding up a flow of ions.
That was I had that feeling. And I think everyone who was working with lifters said that feeling. There's more going on. There's definitely more going on. The problem was the time and the research involved with it. And there was more. I mean, we had it's just strange inertial issues,
because I remember on the book that Tom Ballone wrote about that technology, he said, that the ion wind cannot justify the total amount of thrust that the device is producing, and therefore that appeared to be the unexplored part that will make it propellantless.
Yeah, and then Tom was also into the Jeffimenko stuff, right?
Yes, Jeffimenko, I remember. Yes.
Yeah, and that was the jerk effect. So yeah, I mean, there's potentially something there, but for me, it was kind of, I just hit it. And I felt this with most of the people working on them at the time. We just kind of hit a dead end, so.
Yeah, the problem with anti-gravity is there's not an infinite amount of theories, and at some point you just beat a dead horse. But yeah, I agree that we need to put it in practice, see if it works, and I think that's the next phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was some research going on with MIT, right? I mean, they were doing something with these lifters. I saw some news on that.
I think so. It's NASA has played with them. They've a lot of different people have played with lifters. That's, it's the B-Field Brown, right? It's fairly accessible. It's relatively easy to build, common parts. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, do you want to keep going, or should we close things down for this evening?
But I was wondering, we could also enlarge the circle on the subjects. Like we could talk about, I know, the H+ chemical that is used for electrolysis to separate hydrogen from oxygen and all that, or just talk about other thrusters, propulsion systems and things like that. But it's just an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea, I think. Given the hydrogen electrolysis problem, I mean, it's a big issue.
Yeah, I think energy is something that we'll probably definitely expand into more as well. Michael Perrone is working on some stuff trying to convert Brownian motion into energy. I think that's really interesting. So, maybe that's the change, is alternative propulsion and energy instead of something along those lines. But
Yeah.
Tim, Rick makes an interesting comment about having spoken to 10,000 people, etc., etc. Can Rick expand on that? What is his personal experience? Because that's an interesting comment, that part of real life.
Rick, did you want to?
He made it there. The comment is on.
I can ask him to unmute. Yeah.
Hello, Harold. I don't really have too many comments on it. So I've talked to a lot of different mainstream scientists, and some people think, mainstream scientists say photons don't have mass. And then I talk to some of them and I discuss it, and I use basic science equations, and it winds up with an argument for like 8 hours, and it goes absolutely nowhere. And then I read their paper, and they have 500 equations, and they come up with an answer with a supercomputer. And then I show them how I calculate it with my calculator, and they start insulting you. That's what I run into. So I don't know. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Rick.
Well,
gentlemen, why don't we close things down for this evening? And let me thank you all for attending. And we'll change things up for next month. So, and next month is the 2-year anniversary. So that's time to refresh things and take a new approach. Okay.
Thank you, team. Great work.
Thanks, guys. Have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you. You too.